Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So we'll continue our session with starting with just reminding you about our role as detectives or sleuthing for insights. So if you look at what we're doing today is just going back to what I had talked last week about what an insight is. So just to keep that in the backdrop, then we look at how it translates from a brief to a discussion guide, uh, some best practices in interviewing, and then the discussion, writing the discussion guide. All of these are connected, and that's why we got it like this. So just looking at what is the definition for an insight, as we saw last week, what we are looking for when we are doing a discussion guide and doing this whole process of research, what is it that we are looking for? We're looking for a not yet obvious discovery, or it could be a unique and a fresh perspective, or it could be a deeper view of something obvious, or it could be something which is different from the competition. So, in whether you're a detective or a researcher, what happens is there is some situation of disruption. Like there's a murder or there's a crime. Here we have something which disrupts the scenario in the market, which could be a new communication, which could be a brand extension, which could be somebody leading in shares or a competitive strategy. So something has changed in the market for us to want to know more about that, or to know understand the backdrop around that. And just like in like a detective, he's there's a whole array of people who are brought into the focus, like the witness in crime or the people who were around the crime situation. So here also we are looking at various consumers and various market scenarios, because every consumer segment, whether it's a user or a non-user, they have a certain context to uh, what is happening around them, and we need to know that in detail, which is why we get to use a lot of techniques to understand what's in the minds of the consumer and also see what is around them in the market. Then we also look at not just the consumer, the context. We also look at what are the trends, the attitudes, perceptions, all of that across the consumer segment. And then we bring it all together. We piece the different information that we have, and then we connect patterns. We are looking for new information. We're looking at some key aspects about the market or the brand. So that's how we bring it all together to identify what is relevant for us. So to all this, we saw as last time, consumers are core to the success. And what we need to remember when we go to interview or talk to consumers, they cannot tell us what to do. They can only tell us what they think, what they feel, but they cannot tell us exactly what to do with our marketing objective or with our research objective. Very often, I've seen clients loading a interview with in the customer interaction or the consumer interaction, a lot of questions, and putting in all, packing it with so many objectives. But the point is, we need to give them time to think, we need to give them the space, and we need to understand that they are there to just tell us what they think and feel. It's for us to connect and find what is relevant for us. So keeping that in mind, let's go on. How so here we look at how we move from a brief to actually designing a discussion guide. So let me just give you a couple of examples. So we have the business objective issue of the client, or what you are planning to of your for your brand or for your market. What is the business issue? What is the decision need for the study? Why is it that you want to do this study, and how does it connect to the business issue? So once you have clarity on these, then it's easier to work out the discussion guide. Then you look at the objectives of the research study, and finally the information areas that we need to get answered in such a session. So we start with the macro and we come down to the micro aspects of information areas. So let's say if the business issue is like either you're losing share, or the competition is up their game and therefore you're losing brand, there are a lot of lapses from your brand, or there is an increase in market size, that keeping that being the issue, what is the decision need for the study? What does client need to decide based on the study? What decisions do you want to make? Is there a new concept that you want to launch? Is it you want to improve the ad, or is it you want to explore opportunities among a new segment? Then you look at what are the objectives of the research study. What is it that you want to find out? Is it a concept test? Is it a UNE? What is it that you want to do? And once you've decided the type of or the objectives of the study, then you put down the information areas. And we will go through the different information areas in a little more detail later. But we need to connect business issue, decision need, objectives, so that we get the relevant information areas. So all of these are connected. And let's look at some examples. So if the business issue is brand X losing shares to brand Y after the launch of a new product, there's a slight change in the market, and the client, meaning the competition, you would see it as a potential threat from the competition. So what is the decision need for the study? The point is, how do we arrest the decline of the shares? How to come bring down the lapsing from one brand to another. What are the strengths that you can leverage on your current brand? And what can you do to gain new users from the rest of the users of the category? So in terms of objectives, you will try to understand what are the reasons for lapsing, what are the triggers for the other brand, what is it that they want to, what are the new things, or what is attractive about the brand Y, and then to understand the drivers and loyalty to brand X, and also look at the category as a whole and see what is it that is there in the category that your brand can leverage on. So you are connecting the business issue to the decision need to the objectives, and then you move on to the information areas. So these are all the information areas that one would look at. So typically in any usage and attitude study, or you want to understand what is happening in the brand, amongst the brand or in the category, you start with perceptions towards the category. So you frame questions basically according to the information areas that are there. So you typically will start with, okay, what do you know about, let's say, loyalty cards on when you're shopping online. What is it? What are the factors? Which brands are you aware of, or what do you know about in this category? You don't get to brands initially, you go with category. So awareness and familiarity, what is the emotional and functional needs that you get from this category? Then what are the likes, dislike, what are the reasons for using, what are the benefits of using this category? So the first part is typically about the category without getting into much of brand details. The second part goes closer in terms of understanding the brand. So there you look at all the different brands, which are they aware of, which are they familiar with, what are the associations. And typically, when you look at brand understanding, you always start with a very spontaneous, free flowing association. So, what are all the thoughts that come to your mind when you think of, let's say, Lazada? Okay, so everything that comes to mind, allow the respondent to, you know, give all the impressions that come to their mind. What are the key symbols that you associate? What are the thoughts, the feelings? Then you go on to very specifically about, okay, what is the strength? What are the positives about Lazada? Or what are the weakness? What are the negatives about Lazada? So you go more specific. And then you get on to brand imagery and personification. So brand imagery is typically when you think of someone who's using Lazada, who's what kind of a person comes to your mind? So you start with details like, okay, tell me whether man or women, how old, what kind of what is he looking for, what are his hobbies, why do you think he's shopping on Lazada, and go deeper into the personal part of it. And it could be about personification, which you say, imagine Lazada were to be a person, and then you again probe on each of these specific. It makes it simpler for the consumer. When you start with very basic, they will let imagine whether he's a male or female. Just let's start with that, because there is some resistance to making a person out of brands. So you go slowly, just leave your logic aside, and you're telling this to the consumer. Just let your imagination um, take over and tell me what comes to your mind when you're thinking of Lazada. Is it male? It's female? How old? What kind of a person? What is his character? What are his weakness? So you draw the responses out of this consumer in a systematic way. So you're going broad and then you go specific in this section on brands. And it's very critical to do it in that format, because it helps the consumer relate about the brand in various ways. And when you see, and you will see a certain pattern emerging out of all the responses, and which is uh, why do we need to have so many techniques? Because you want to see the consistency of responses across all these different answers. So that's why you try out various techniques, which we saw last time. You will do a personification, you will do a deprivation, you will do a balloon technique. And so you see what are the consistency in responses, and then that's the key insight that happens. So once you've got all the attitude perceptions to brands, then you go on to actual use. We always want to check on attitudes before we go on to the actual use, which is a very rational set of answers, right? Because you are saying what are the problems that you had. And so typically what you would do is, let's say the last time you shopped online on Lazada, what was your experience? So what made you go shop there? What are the negative experience? What is the positive experience? What are the steps you took? Then you get very specific into use. So these three buckets, are typically the flow that happens in a usage and attitude study. So attitude towards category, then towards brand, and then actual use of the brand. And then at the last part, you can either check on concepts, you can check on trends, various other add-ons which are not so significant in the study. And we'll come to why we do that, because every group, every individual, there is a process that happens in the interaction, and we need to be aware of that. So I'll come to that a little later. So then you also have a research design based on uh, the business objectives. So either you're going to a specific set of users, your own users, or competition users. That is, you decide that depending on the business issue. So this is a second example on how the business issue decision need objective translates into a information area. So let's say you want to grow the market for your brand, and therefore you're testing new promotion or a new idea in loyalty programs, or it could be a new product like some new feature in an e-wallet. So you have the stimulus with you, and so that is the business issue, is to see what can we do to improve the market. So the decision need is to see, is that a promising STB is a storyboard. It could be a concept, it could be idea, and how to improve. If you have a storyboard or if you have an idea, how to improve that. So that is the decision need. And the objective is to understand how the storyboard concept or idea works amongst our target segment. So that is the objective. And therefore, the information need will be the following. So you take a concept or a storyboard or a promotion idea, and you check out in detail about the reactions to the idea itself. So even here, there's always a process which we typically follow, which is given here, which is first you start with spontaneous. What is the first thing that comes to your mind? It's always spontaneous reaction to a new stimuli or something new that you want to check. So the first thing is spontaneous. What are all the different things that come to your mind? The next is, what is the one key message that you can understand out of this idea? What is the one message? Then you go on to what kind of a product are they talking about? Sometimes, it's very important to ask this question, even though it's obviously we're talking about a loyalty card or about a detergent, whatever it is. We need to know whether the consumers have registered that it is in an ad for a loyalty card or for an e-wallet. So what is the product that we're talking about? Then you go on to the likes, dislikes, and these components, which we call the ad diagnostics or the concept diagnostic, which is believability, uniqueness, relevance, are very critical. So you ask them whether you can believe that that this idea is believable. Is there anything which is difficult to believe? Is it unique in the marketplace? And is it relevant to what you're looking for, to your needs? So you ask, these three are very critical in terms of understanding what is working in terms of the concept or the idea. And then you ask intention to purchase. How, if this were to be launched in the market, would you consider it? To what extent? And which brand would you choose? Let's say multiple brands are there in the market with this kind of an offer. Which brand would you choose? So this is the first set of reaction that you get to the idea, the concept that you're checking. And then you do evaluation with current offers. You can, which is your comparative evaluation. And the next point on contextual, you can look at how they use it, what are the other things they consider. So all the other category related issues you can talk at a later stage. So this is how the information areas pan out in a typical testing of a concept, testing of a promotion idea, testing of a storyboard. It could be anything. Okay, so this is another example. Before we go on to a little more on the discussion guide, I wanted to share with you some of the best practices in interviewing, because that's very important in how you elicit information from the consumer. So where does best practicing in interview come from? It is empathy, genuineness, and unconditional positive regard. Now, interviewing is not very different from typical relationship that we forge with another person. So when you want to form a relationship with some person, you show empathy, you show genuineness, and you show it's a non-judgmental approach that you have. And this is what you follow even when you're with a consumer. You have you have to be natural, and in the best way, create a situation where the consumer trusts you to give you the information. So which means you have to be empathetic, which means you have to understand what they are thinking, feeling, be transparent, about what you're looking for. So those are critical in terms of best practice. Another point is introduction is very important. It's very important that you do the right introduction, which is, we have to understand that the person has come in there with certain agenda on his own. So we need to know if you know when he meets you, he's evaluating you as a person. Do I like this person? Do I not like this person? Do I feel challenged here? Do I feel insecure? Will she or he be bossy? So these are the questions that a consumer would have typically when you meet a stranger. So you need to be aware of those aspects, and make the situation for the consumer more friendly, more relaxed, so that they are able to give you the best answers. So it has to be introduction is very important, because it sets up the tone uh, for the rest of the going for the rest of the 1 hour or 2 hour that you're there. And whether it's a group or an interview, you need to be able to manage the different set of people. So also when in an interview, when you're introducing yourself and making it kind of natural for them to speak, you also give them permission to be themselves, so that they are not fearful of being judged. So that is very critical. They have to not see you as a threat. So it is partners in inquiry. That's what you set out. So this introduction is a very important aspect in any interview. So typical, whatever you do in the introduction, I don't have to go through this. So here, you typically tell them there are no right or wrong answers, and we are here, it's a relaxed setup, and make it uh, kind of warm and friendly for them. So it removes the anxiety, it sets the expectation, it encourages the answers, and it also shows that the researcher is a responsible person and is taking care of them. So which is what an introduction does. Another thing, like just like I said, interview is a very natural conversation. Even research is a way of thinking and being. It's how you are on a normal day. All the best practices in interviewing is about best practices in creating a relationship. There's no difference in it. You do the same thing as you would do in when you interact with, or you want to build a relationship with someone. Here, because you know you want something out of them, it's all the more important that you create that environment for them. So it's a way of being and thinking. It's not different from who you are. When For us researchers, that's the way we see ourselves. We are always like this, we always wanting to strike up a relationship with people. We learn that over time and we follow the practices. So it's about, like I said, it's about getting people comfortable, whether it's an interview or a group. You're working out the dynamics here and trying to stay neutral. That is also very critical, that you stay neutral. You're not giving your opinion about anything. There are times when a respondent, a consumer will ask you, okay, what do you think? And then you just put it back to them saying, I'm waiting for you to answer that. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. You put back the question onto. So it's about staying neutral. It's about making people comfortable. These are very critical, and of course, staying on topic, which is the most important. So typically, as people, we have a lot of prejudices. We make our own hypotheses about people. So when you meet a person, when you meet a consumer, you are making certain hypotheses about them. You kind of you are, because your past experience will lead you into that. But the clear thing here is for you not to do that. You have to leave it open to allow the consumer to give their opinion, their thoughts, and for you not to make any hypothesis. So it's very important to keep your prejudices, your biases aside when you're interviewing. So I'm going to show you a video here, which is on priming. He's explaining clearly on priming and how they use it to manipulate situations. And it's very important for us as researchers that we have to be careful about what not to do, because this video is on what to do in a sales situation, how they manipulate people to respond in a certain way. But in a research setting, we want people to be objective, or we want to be objective so that we get the best answers out of them. So let me just share this video with you. It'll tell you what not to do. uh,
In this video, I'll explain what priming is and how people are constantly using it to manipulate you.
Can you see? No, no.
We could see your screen, but not the video. So, but we could hear the video.
Okay.
In which the introduction.
Can you see now?
Can see.
Yeah? The video, right?
Can see it, but just need to hear.
I'll just start from the beginning.
Okay.
Priming is and how people are constantly using it to manipulate you subconsciously or deliberately. Priming is a psychological term and it can be defined in many ways, but the shortest and most accurate definition, in my opinion, goes something like this. It is a technique in which the introduction of one stimulus influences how people respond to subsequent stimuli. Now, what does that mean? Let's take an example. I'm going to say some words and then I'm going to ask you a question. Yellow, tropical, palm. Now, if I were to ask you to mention a fruit right now, you would probably say banana. That's obvious. This has to do with the way the mind works in associations. The mind is, or the brain at least, is an associative machine, quote unquote. Now, this was probably not a surprise to you, but how about this fact? Now, if I just said yellow, 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 or even if I hadn't said yellow, if this wall behind me was yellow, and then after watching this video, you entered a room and someone had a ball of fruit and offered you to take any piece of fruit that you want. And even though this ball would be filled with pears and apples and peaches and bananas, you would be, statistically speaking, you'd be more inclined to choose the banana. Now, this gives us some clues as to who uses this technique and how they use it. Marketing agencies, online and in the physical world, are very much aware of this. They know that priming works and they also know how it works and they use it all the time. Now, if you start noticing, you will quickly realize that these people are really trying to prime me. Now, there are many specific subgenres, subtypes of priming, but I'm just going to go over a few of them and the most crucial ones in this video. So here's an example of how it actually works. Now just lean back and enjoy the ride. Happiness, life, smoking. Did you feel like buying a pack of cigarettes? Now let's reset and try this again. Smoking kills. Now, the image you're looking at right now is exactly the same image you just looked at a minute ago, but depending on how we frame it, because you saw all these nice priming, like just positive emotion priming, and of course the music as well, led to you having a positive feeling about this cigarette, probably, I'm guessing. And in the same manner, by showing you all these disgusting, shocking, horrible photos of sick people, old people, dying people, surgery, etc., we can frame it, and the music as well, we can frame the cigarette as Satan itself, almost. That's how priming works. So we're starting to see why advertising companies show you a person in a hammock on a tropical bounty island or something like that when they want you to buy a lottery ticket. You are subconsciously being primed to think that lottery tickets equals this paradise island. Another category of priming is called conceptual priming. That has to do with our brain placing different words and concepts in the same overall category. Now, an example could be cat and mouse, but another example could of course be cat, dog, hamster, and you would obviously understand that this category would be domesticated pets or something like that. Now, one of my good friends has a pillow on his couch that says discipline equals freedom. It's a huge pillow and you can't really miss it. But again, even though he's not looking at it all the time, he is deliberately trying to prime his subconscious mind, his own subconscious mind, to pair these two concepts so they ultimately fall in the same category. In other words, he will understand that by exerting discipline, having self-discipline, he will achieve freedom, or at least that's how he chooses to prime himself. But there are so many ways in which priming works. For instance, numbers. If someone says $10,000, $12,000, $20,000, and then they try to sell you a product or a service, and turns out it's only $900, you're much more inclined to think, oh, that's cheap, because you've been primed to think in high numbers. So that's just another example of how priming works. Now, this is the first video in a series of 3 videos on priming. The other 2 videos, I'm going to link to them above or below this video. The other 2 videos are about how you can use priming to manipulate others. And this last video is about how you can use priming to manipulate yourself. This
Yeah, can you see my screen back?
Yes, Jaisy, you can see our screen.
Okay. Okay. So how is priming relevant in research? Very important in terms of the words that you use. You know, your questions are questions and do not have any adjectives or any of the words that would influence. It's very important what are the words that you're using. Even in terms of, saying things like, to what extent do you like? It's sometimes a leading question. What you ask is, okay, what are your reactions? That's it. As you know, there are times, of course, when we ask them what do you like or what do you dislike, but you always start with a very neutral question, which is what is your reaction, and then see, okay, what is it that you like about this or what you did not like. So very important that you do not prime your consumer, which is look out for the words that you're using in your questions. Second one is, what is the structure of the questions or the topics that you're going to follow. Typically, if you want reactions, let's say, to an absolutely new concept or a new idea, then we do not ask category questions. We will go straight to with the new. We'll say, today we have something new here to show you, and we go straight into getting reactions about that particular concept. Of course, you would do the introduction and then go on to actually getting the reactions to that idea. And within the reaction, like I told you earlier, you go gradually. You ask, okay, what are all the things spontaneously, what comes to your mind? Then you go on to, what do you think of this? Then you move on to like, dislike, strength, negative. So there is a certain flow. So the priming is the fact behind this kind of a questionnaire that you would set. You always have to watch out that you do not lead the consumer in any way. Okay. So the questions that you ask and the order of questions that you ask is very important when it comes to being objective. Another point that I want to cover here today is about eliciting information is more than just asking questions. It's not just about questions. It's about not just about what you tell the consumer. It's also about what you do. It's about your own posture. What is how do you approach, or what is the tone of your voice? What is your body language? How do you put forward the question? Is it like move forward and then kind of drill the consumer, versus you sit back, allow the respondent to enjoy talking to you? So that is also a very critical part of interviewing, not a non-directive approach, not being judgmental, not giving information about your views, and using stimulus that enhances or stimulates their thinking. So it's very important to use stimulus, using open questions, things like what do you think, how would you sum up, just think again for a moment, allow them to think a little more. So there are various ways you can lead on the consumers. Creating empathy using the respondent language, that's a very important, another very important role, which is whatever language the consumer uses, you pick up that and question. So if he says uh, something like if he uses a certain adjective, saying whether it's beautiful, or if he says it's gorgeous, so then you would put back saying, why do you think it's gorgeous? A simple example like that. So you use the language with the respondents have used, and then you make them into questions. Also, you have to pick up to what is not being said about the topic. So you have to be aware of that, and allowing the respondents the space to reflect and tell you in their own words. So here I want you to I want to bring in this concept of system one and system two, just to make you aware of the process that happens with the consumer. So when you ask a spontaneous question, when you ask for, let's say, spontaneous reactions, that first set of reaction is very critical because it operates from system one, which is your fast, spontaneous, involuntary, intuitive, also very emotionally charged kind of responses. That's why in qualitative, this whole spontaneous reaction is a very important thing. It's very critical. There are, uh, in different sessions, we actually get people to put it down on post-its and to elaborate on each of those points, depending on the research objective. So this is a very critical part, the spontaneous, and it comes out of their own system one, which is fast, intuitive kind of a response. This
Jaisy,
is
yeah, because we have this question all the time, especially from design researchers and designers, that how do you do FGDs without having any bias? And this is where you mentioned the post-it. So if you could just elaborate on that point on how it is done, and so that you avoid any kind of bias in a focus group.
okay. Yeah, the post-it that's right, Sanchita. Post-it is helps us to get out of this being influenced by others in the group. So what we tell them is, I will give you a word. You have to prepare the respondents for this. So you tell them, I'm giving you an idea or whatever you want to take reaction to. I'm going to give you this concept, and I want each of you all to put down spontaneously what comes to your mind about this aspect, about this product. So, and you give them post-its and tell them to put down as many thoughts. It's very important because people stop with one or two. So what comes to your mind immediately when you hear this word? What are the thoughts that come to your mind when this product, when you see this product? Or what are the feelings, what are the emotion, what other kind of products come to mind when you are presented with this concept? So you get the spontaneous reaction in many different ways, and each individual is putting down on a post-it. Then once they've all written down on the post-it, then you tell them, we'll go one by one and you will only tell me the points that you have mentioned on the post-it, because we don't want the last person to be talking points from the first person. So we tell them to go back to their notes and tell us, elaborate on each point. So there they will they might have just put the point, and we are asking them to elaborate. Now when you say beautiful, okay, what does beautiful mean to you? So you, when they give you those reactions, you ask further questions on each of those points, which the consumer would have put down. Now, this is in very literary terms, it's something called stream of consciousness, which is you're allowing a respondent to think through the entire reaction in a very continuous flow of thought. So So you're getting a reaction to an idea. One, you're allowing them to put down everything, which is continuity. Then you're asking them every individual aspect, which is getting the entire range of thoughts. So whatever thoughts could have entered their minds at that point, um, you collect, and you'll probably spend at least 3 to 5 minutes with each respondent and going back to the post-it that they. So by doing that, you can get a pretty objective initial responses from all the consumers, because later on when you open it to the rest of the group and other questions, of course they do get influenced, but the first part of it is is absolutely objective for each of them. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that should be, because that's
Okay.
which a lot of times, or most of the researchers have, or even the designers have this question.
Okay. Then the system two response is typically the very rational. You think through your the steps that you take in, like if it is a part to purchase, a decision making process. That is system two, where actually you're going back to very logically saying, okay, I did this, I did the next step is this. It follows steps, it follows a certain sequence. Whereas in system one, does not follow a sequence. It's everything that comes to your mind. So all of us react to a situation initially with system one and then with system two. And this is what you need to keep in mind when you're talking to your respondents. So just to give a visually, system one is involuntary, intuition, effortless, innate, it's speed, it's immediate response. Whereas system two is patience, constructed thoughts, it's effort, it's logical, it's reason, all of that. Yeah. So when we ask them questions, so it is important in the initial part that your questions are as minimal, because you get objective answers from them when your questions are objective. And later on when it comes to the system two is when you can probe more, and after the initial, let's say 5-10 minutes, then it's a system two kind of a mode, and it gets you get more logical answers. Are you hearing some traffic noise?
Yeah, it's just there, but it's okay. We can hear you very clearly. Otherwise,
Okay. 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 Another, so this is one thought that we have to keep is be very objective. Do not prime your consumers into giving you the answers that that will influence them in any way. The second thing that you have to keep in mind is that people rationalize their responses. So even if you look at your own behavior, let's say you do something, let's say you go, you go to a very fancy new restaurant, and you spend a huge amount of money, and later on if you have certain guilt about it, or if your friends are saying, oh, why did you go and spend so much money, you have very many reasons for having gone there. You will justify your action. So people do that even when they give you their opinion. Okay, if they've sometimes they've said something which is not their opinion, but they would rationalize and try and make up stories around that. I think I had a video here which was from Friends. If you all follow Friends, uh, let me just see if that video is there. Sorry. Can you see?
See what I see?
oh, can't see as yet. Just can hear.
It must be out.
Maybe share your video player,
Yeah, I'll
See
just.
what I see?
not this screen.
Okay, I think I'll skip it. It's giving problems, so I'll just skip that.
You have to share your video player, and then it will show. Basically,
Yeah, yeah.
and then you share the screen later. So you start the video first at your end, and then you share the screen once it starts playing at your.
Now?
No,
Hmm?
not yet.
Still no?
You can just
Okay.
yeah,
Uh,
share screening. You have to stop and then share again at the
yeah,
video.
I did that. I did that.
Yeah, I know this Zoom has this issue. So
Okay, yeah. Okay, and I'm saying share sound. It's this not a very important video, so if it have, is it happening now?
you can see, can hear.
Okay. Okay. Now back to screen. So I just shared this because we need to keep in mind that consumers will justify their actions. So once you do something, everything else, the story around it will, will they'll say anything to make their action logical or seem like it is an action that they have genuinely done. And how do you overcome this, which is more important, right? So one is, you look at, when you get a sense of people are rationalizing their behavior or they're not saying the right things, what you do is you either you ask them at different levels at different points in time during the interview. You ask them the same question. That is one. Second, if it is an action, let's say a purchase habit, a purchase shopping habit that they've done, then you ask them for the last three incidents of shopping, online shopping. Okay, so then you see a pattern in how they are doing it, how each time they are, what are the reasons they are giving, what are the steps involved. There you'll get the true answers. So you have to overcome this whole rationalization that consumers get involved in or do quite often. It comes naturally to us. We don't do it consciously. Sometimes we do it just because we want to get ourselves looking good or looking right. So we need to keep that in mind. Okay. A little more on eliciting skills. So just some of thoughts here are, um, one is the open-ended questions. All your questions, if they're open-ended, then it allows space for people to answer you. Prompts and probes, where you just say, okay, what did you mean? Again, remember, it has to be objective. It cannot be leading. So you simply ask, what does that mean? What did you just say? Could you repeat that in another word for me? Paraphrasing, just summarizing what they are saying. Or in certain situation, you challenge in terms of, okay, why did you say that? I mean, why would you not say something else? Summarizing, and plus rewards and engagement. I'll come to rewards and engagement a little later. So open and closed questions are, open questions are who, what, where, when, how. You just allow themselves to open up with on each of these questions. So you're not giving any specific leads. Closed questions are, did you do it? Have you? Is it like this? So just ensure that your questions are worded with the who, what, where, when, why. I think typically you all do that, just to remind you on this. So closed questions, avoid the closed questions is what I would say. Also use paraphrasing. To be objective, you have to say, okay, what I'm hearing is this. Okay, what does that mean? I'm getting the idea that you're saying this. Again, what does that mean? So go back to asking them to, explain or elaborate. Paraphrasing. So it helps the respondent to feel understood. What they feel is, okay, this person is trying to understand me or understands me, therefore is asking more questions. Again, like I said, make it objective, like a natural conversation. Some of the ways you can explore, elaborate is, tell me more, I wonder what this means, that's interesting, etc. You can, or just even nodding or saying and all that will help them to continue in their own space and speed. Okay. So again, like I a lot of prompts that you can use, various ways that, if I, you can use a prompt, what kind, just 1 second. Can close if I could get inside your head, what would you be thinking? That's interesting. Could you explain a little more? So just these questions. Why I'm putting down these questions, because just to give you a sense of having very objective set of questions and getting answers from them, rather than, I mean, and being careful about not using leading questions. This just for a slight relaxation, meaning slight change of thought. So some of the notes from a disorder in court. So the guy asks, what's your date of birth? And he says, July 15th. Which year? Every year. Or, what gear were you in at the moment of the impact? Gucci sweats and Reeboks. What I'm trying to say here with these rather okay jokes is that there are times when they misunderstand you and they will say something else. So it is for you to be patient and for you to manage that situation. The minute you get impatient, you set off the consumer on a different path. So it's very important that you allow them, okay, if you say every year, could you tell me which year you were born? Just elaborate a little more patiently, show them your patience, show them that you are wanting the genuine answer, and you will get that. Okay. So there is a process which happens whether it is an interview or a group. Okay. Imagine you're doing a group or an interview. There is a certain process that the group or the interview itself takes on. Okay. So when you just imagine you yourself in a new situation with the new person, what happens to you, right? You are evaluating the room, you're evaluating the person in front of you. So there's so many things going on in your mind, and you need to understand that this is what happens with the consumer who's coming to speak to you. So it's very important that you understand what situation that they are in. So let's say in the initial part of the group, um, the respondent or whoever the consumer is not thinking about uh, about you or what questions you're going to ask. They're thinking about themselves, they're thinking about everything that is around them. Okay, so it's very important that we understand that. And every group takes on, every interview takes on this shape. The first part is where you're kind of taking control or assessing the situation around you. You're seeing yourself as two different people or many different people, because you're all, each one come from somewhere, you're all each individual entity. So you're there, you're just there. So you're kind of forming, there's a stage called forming where I'll go on to the next slide, where you are all separate individuals come for a common purpose. So if you look at the body language, each of them are a little aloof, and they are reserved, they don't know what is going to happen, so they are a bit reserved. And this is typically how any interview, the process happens. So initially there is a bit of distance that is there, and it's for you to bridge that distance. So what we do typically in a group situation is, as a moderator, I would move forward. I would actually lean inside the group, and then convey that I'm actually physically closer to them than otherwise, rather than sitting back and being distant from them. In fact, there was a study done in somewhere in by the British colleges, I think Columbia University, where when they served a warm drink to the people who came for the interview, people were warmer as compared to those who were served a cold drink, where people were more cold. They actually did this interview and found that a warm drinks make people more friendly and a cold drinks make people more distant. So we need to be aware of what we are putting, the situation that we are putting them in. So the initial one is where we are forming. The next is storming, where everyone is trying to get themselves heard and making sure that their voices, their thoughts, opinions are coming through. Or there are people, typically in any group there is one person who will take on more control than the others. So that is storming, which is happening in the life cycle of an interview or a group. The next is norming, where people now feel, okay, here is a group, each one of us have a chance to talk, and it's more comfortable. So those kind of messages come through, and where they begin to understand the situation that they're in. So that is called norming. The next one is performing, where they know, okay, now let me do best what I've come here for, and they cooperate, they answer. You can see their body language, it's come closer, they are more relaxed, there's more smiles, and they're not back on their seat. So you see the performing part. And the last is when there are times when people get disinterested, and then they kind of get withdraw again. So that is the mourning stage, need to let go. And why am I telling you these stages? Very important to structure your interview in a way that the last part is are questions which are not as important for the study. It's very important. And the middle part is where you get your chunk of data. The most critical part of your research is done in the middle part. And of course, the first part is the introduction part. So you follow the life cycle of the group or the interview to get a best output. Okay, now we go on to discussion guides. Let me give you a few tips on discussion guides. Okay. Um, so discussion guides are actually energy guides or process guides. They're not just a set of questions. Uh, the discussion guide structure will be formed basis the process that you just saw. The warm up, the chunk of the questions, and then pulling out essential insights, and then just getting doing checking on topics that are less important at the end, and then summarizing and reflecting. So you follow this pattern of the group cycle. Let me skip this. So it's an energy guide. So there, in a typical discussion guide, you don't have to follow any certain pattern. It depends on the business objective. If the objective, like I talked about earlier, you want to get reaction to a particular new idea, then you go very specific to the idea. Otherwise, you can talk about various topics at different points in time. So typically you'll have a rational conscious, you'll have an emotional intuitive, social group, cultural. These are the different aspects that you will cover. And depending on your business objective, typically we go for the emotional intuitive part, so that we can get that first, the stream of consciousness, the individual responses, all of that in the first part. So but these don't have to be linear. Depending on your objective, you choose these chunks of topics. A guide is not a script. It's flexible, it's adaptable, it's evolving. So it's very important to allow your guide to grow as you're doing the interview. So there is no one way of asking the question, but a good question is one which does not affect the answer, which we already saw in priming. Okay. So typically when we look at, let's say we are investigating the category of chocolate or any category, typically we will first understand the person, which is people. We'll understand their usage behavior in a usage and attitude study, then feelings, benefit, complaints, competition, and finally trends. Trends is the social, the cultural context, all of that. The first part is about the consumer, and the in between part is about the category itself. And there you look at various subsections. So this is typically the way we do a usage and attitude study. So and one thought here is, when you have any hypothesis about, let's say you're doing a loyalty card study on loyalty cards, if you have any hypothesis about men using more of loyalty card versus the younger men, older men using more of loyalty cards as compared to younger men, so you have these hypotheses in mind which you will confirm during the group. So you set out your discussion guide keeping the hypothesis in mind, and therefore your questions areas of investigation are like that. Okay, so we looked at concepts like this, Las Live and the unboxing. So I thought, let me frame a set of the discussion guide basis. Let's say you were checking out something like this. So if you had these are the stimulus, what would you do? So there are two ways of doing it. Like I said earlier, if it is absolutely new and you want completely unbiased responses, then you start with section reaction to specific promotion. You start with this section. Okay. But if it is a broader study where you want to know more about the consumer and also check specifics to promotion, then it follows, it could be placed as third in sequence. It need not be the first one. Okay. So, so when you ask questions on the category, like attitude towards promotion in general, you're priming the consumer to answer in a certain way. Because after that, if you go on to reaction to specific promotion, he's already answered, everything about the category. So those responses will influence what he's saying in specific to that particular idea, which is why you need to decide whether you want a very unbiased reaction to the specific promotion, or you want to see it in the context of the category. That's a question that you would ask first and then design your guide accordingly. So in this guide, what I've put is, if let's say we are getting reactions to promotion, first you'll do the customer profile, then you look at involvement of the person in shopping online, their general behavior with regard to shopping online, and then go on to attitude towards promotion in general. So it could be the types of promotion they recall, awareness, uh, anything key message, design, model, all of that, and example of an ideal promotion, what do they think is best in promotion. So you cover all that, then you go on to specific, show them your idea and get reaction to it. In this part, all of these are very important: the overall reaction, key elements liked, and the diagnostics. So like I said, if it's a new idea or if it is an idea where you want to get unbiased responses, do it first, because that's the focus of your study. So after your customer profile, you would do reaction to specific promotion next. Then the third part, where you compare with competition, you understand what are the trends in terms of promotions or all of that, comes later at the last part. So section 10 is all of these, which is overall reactions, reasons why, how does each one compare the different promotion or different ideas, how do they compare. You could do user imagery here and also improvement areas. So you close with that. So this is how typically a guide flows in terms of promotion. Some of the questions you can add here, if your objective is to understand specific reaction. So here you can talk about design elements on how the whole layout of this feed is, in terms of the layout, in terms of the color combination, in terms of the reactions to the store, the Ravanda store. So you can put in a lot more details here to get more information. What is your reactions to the different design styles, not just the of the feed, but of the products that are there. So you go specific into the styling and design of the products and also the price. So these are additional questions you can add here at this stage. Similarly, on last live, you can add specific onto color scheme here, the orange versus the blue, or the layout of uh, the whole the promotion. Any questions here? Any thoughts on this? If you want to ask specifically to this section. Okay. So that is typically how you would take reaction to a promotion. If it is usage and attitude, I've taken the example of e-wallets. Again, if you see, very similar to, you'll see a certain pattern in the way the discussion guides are made. So initially, it is the customer profile. It is second is the involvement of the person in shopping online. So you cover the customer part first, then you go on attitude towards a category, attitude towards a brand, and then category trends. And I put down specific questions in terms of attitude towards categories. So you look at, if it's about e-wallets, you will look at understanding their shopping habits in general, the type of products, purchase, not purchase. Then you look at the process involved in shopping. How do they actually shop? What are the steps? And the whole more focus on the payment option, and how do they manage the payment, and therefore how do they choose the payment option, because your focus is on e-wallet, so you would focus there on payment option. How do they choose a shopping, do they choose a shopping site dependent on the payment? I doubt they do it, but if they do that, then attitude towards different brands of payment options. So whether it's Google Pay or whether it is Paytm or whatever, so you get specific about brands awareness, spontaneous reactions to the different brands. So you should also maintain that until this point in time you don't talk about brands. Very often consumers do talk about brands, but you'll tell them, say, okay, let's handle this later, and you focus on the category. If you can separate the category and the brand, there are certain categories where you cannot separate, the brand becomes the category, like uh, probably, I don't know, luxury cars, or everybody's thinking Mercedes, and they will bring in Mercedes into the category discussion. So it's important to keep the category discussion and the brand discussion separate, so that you get a more objective assessment of the brand. So you evaluate brands separately, spontaneous reaction, imagery. Typically in an e-wallet, personification you would do not with a person, but with a car or a building, so that it's a little more, the categories kind of match. And also choose pictures that best represent the brand, where you collect pictures and then expose it to them and get reaction. And the third one is about category trends. Anything you've noticed in payment schemes, what do you expect more in this kind of a category? Those kind of questions come towards the end. And of course, typically we also, any extra reactions to concepts or idea are done at the end, which is not so important. Again, a ad or a concept testing, same flow, where you are asking about customer profile, role of, this is for a smartphone, if role of smartphone in their lives, then you understand the whole category of smartphones in terms of brand recall, association, perceptions, how they make the purchase, and then you go on to evaluating the ad or a concept. Okay. And again, if you've noticed, always the concept testing starts with spontaneous key message and then the diagnostics. The diagnostics are relevance, credibility, uniqueness, persuasion. Okay, so to what extent is this relevant for you? Uh, is this new idea believable in terms of what it's offering? Or would you say it's unique? Or, I mean, what do you think of this idea? In terms of how is it different from other players in the market? So what you're asking is whether it's unique or not unique. And similarly, persuasion, would you buy or not buy this? After having seen this idea, would you buy into this idea? So here we also follow up with the question which says, to what extent would you buy? So you can have a rating scale, which is 1 to 10 or 1 to 5, and say 5 being you will definitely buy, and 1 being you will definitely not buy. Now, why are we asking a quant scale here? just as a stimulus, it gets the respondent to force an answer. They will say a 3 or a 4 or a 5, but that is not important when we are working out the findings. What is important is, why did you say that? Why did you say 4 or 5? And in qualitative, we focus on the why. In fact, at every there's something I think I missed. In every answer that they give, we always have a follow-up question saying, why do you say so? If they say, okay, this is relevant to this, I use this in my house on a regular basis, especially if they're using a product, then why do you say so? Or if they say, if this is a very unique or a different idea, why do you say so? So the why is very important follow-up to every aspect um, of this ad diagnostics, which is relevance, credibility, uniqueness, and inclination to change behavior. Then the last part will be, you can understand, if you see brand perception initially, you can take an evaluation of the brand after having shown the ad. This gives us an idea of how the new ad or the concept has impacted the brand. So this is a pre assessment of the brand on the left, which is brand perception. That is a pre assessment. Then you get reactions to the ad or concept, and then you have a post assessment of the brand. And when you compare pre assessment and post assessment in terms of what the perception is, then you will get the difference or the newness or what happened differently after having shown the brand. So this is a very important aspect in an ad or a concept testing. Okay. So I have in various discussion guides talked about involvement of the person shopping online or role of smartphones in their lives. So how do you do this? This question, how does is it asked? It's a very uh, it's not an easy question. So you can't just ask a person, what is the role of shopping in your life? They will answer to some extent, but they will not give you a complete answer. So typically what I do is, I work out a couple of statements and I put those statements in front of them in cards. So mobile phone is a means of communicating with each other. Owning mobile is about status, or it's a means of having control. So you put down these statements in front of the consumer, you put it on a card and ask them to choose one, and then explain through the statement what more they think, so they can elaborate a little more. And this is part of the motivation model that I showed you last time. I'll just refer it here. So these 6 statements actually reflect these 6 motivation segments. Okay. So I know that's a different class on its own, and we are running short of time here. So basically, you can have statements on all these different 6 different motivations. So these are the 6 different motivation, and you take a category and frame statements to match these motivations, and then you get the role of involvement in the category to a much better extent, and you are able to understand the customer a little more when you do this. Of course, this is a kind of extra training by, it's a patented product, and in large agencies it's a separate division altogether. But I use a generic model now that I'm on my own, and I work out these statements. Okay. Now again, these pictures are also linked to those statements. The type of people we have in mind. Now that I've done a lot of work, I'm able to do this much easier. And then uh, how do we use these stimulus? So again, you put these 6 people in front of them, tell them to choose one that they like most. Okay, which one of them do you relate to the most? It's a very, even before you get into any question, you tell them, pick one picture which you think is more like you, who you feel you're similar to, or who represents your character the best. You can put the question in any way, and they will pick up that one person. And then you ask them, about that person, and they start talking about themselves, which is the importance of a projective technique, because they are projecting all their character, their behavior onto the stimulus in front of them. So they will talk through this person about, okay, and your questions are about her, not about the respondent. Okay, what do you think about this person once that they've chosen that? What do you think about this person? What is her personality? What are her key strengths, key weaknesses? What are her hobbies? How would she use a smartphone? Describe all the features that are important to her. What does she like about the, her brand of smartphone? Why did she choose it? So you can ask all kinds of questions at this point, but they will at some point, they themselves realize that they're talking about their own self, and they'll start saying I instead of her. You'll see that happening over the conversation. So initially it starts with she is like this, she is like that, and then it goes on to, okay, I buy this phone, and I, as it goes on. So it's about projecting all your thoughts and behavior on the other person, and it works very well. And we have aligned this to the 6 motivations. So each of them are also represent a certain personality trait, you know, uh, or like either control or a status or whatever the personality is. Each of them will represent that. And even if you're not able to find pictures to represent each of the states, you can just use a person's picture, but always give them options. Don't do it to a limited, at least have 7 8 options, and tell them to just talk through those pictures. So even if you just use it as a stimulus, it helps you get a lot more richer, engaging conversation, more better answers, as compared to if you were to say, okay, tell me about yourself, tell me your personality, or why did you buy this phone. So it's far better responses when you use a technique like